noticed it, but I think we've been experiencing wild attacks of the demons lately. Just think of Stephen Paddock, who, without any reason, went up to the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Hotel and then broke out the windows and shot 58 people, killing them, and wounded 585 people, all of them perfect strangers. And he had no apparent motive. He didn't need money, he had plenty. He wasn't looking for revenge. He didn't know the people he was shooting. It wasn't racially motivated. He shot at everyone on the ground.
Preach.
It wasn't political. He wasn't known to have any political opinions. It was just demonic. He was just led there by the demon. And then Satan had him kill himself afterwards. And just think of what happened here several months in August with James Fields. James Fields is 20 years old. He has no violent history of crime, and yet he took his car into our downtown mall and killed Heather Heyer and wounded 19 other people for apparently no sensical reason, other than that he feared that blacks and Jews were trying to take over the nation. And that's just not true, because he even plowed into a largely white group and ended up killing a woman who wasn't even Jewish and was white. What sense does that make? Nothing. It's just demonic. And that's what we can say is happening in our world. The devil is just roaming free and attacking people and using them. And then when he's finished with them, he just wipes them off the face of the earth. And we can know that this is the devil's work because Jesus tells us that this is war and that there's no neutral ground. If you're not on my side, you're the enemy. If you're not helping, you're making things worse. These two men align themselves with the enemy rather than the one who lived and died to conquer the enemy. They chose Satan rather than Christ and worked for Satan, and he led them to destruction. And this is what we all need to know, is that there is no in-between ground between Christ and the enemy. You're either for Christ or you're against him. You're either for good or for evil. There's no in-between ground. You either think that whites and blacks and Asians and Hispanics and all nationalities are equal, or else you're a racist.
Preach.
You're just a racist if you don't think we're all equal.
Thank you.
Amen.
And there's no in-between ground. You can't say, well, I have no opinion on that. Either you think we're all equal or you don't think we're all equal.
Thank you.
There's no in-between on that. You must take an opinion on that. You must choose either with God, who created us equal, or the devil, who wants us to all divide up and destroy one another. There is only one choice to make, yay or nay.
Amen.
And we're in this war. And this war is a fight for our souls every single day. And Jesus goes on to explain how we face this on an everyday basis. And by telling us a story about a man who had a corrupting spirit expelled from him. And this corrupting spirit drifted along through the desert looking for an oasis. Some unsuspecting soul, it can be devil. When it doesn't find anyone, it says, I'll go back to my old haunt. This is someone who has been able to get rid of one addiction, and we all have addictions.
Thank you.
We're all addicted to alcohol, drugs, sleep, depression, food, lying, gossiping, cheating, something that we do.
Thank
We
you.
all have an addiction in our life. And we can overcome that addiction. But it's what happens after we overcome that addiction that really matters. My husband had a boss named Don, and Don was a committed alcoholic. Every day at 5 o'clock he would open up the office cabinet in the kitchen and bring out the alcohol, whiskey and bourbon and beer and vodka, and he'd start drinking and offering it to everyone in the office. And by 6 o'clock, he was drunk on his face. And he did this year after year after year, until one day, he finally just emptied out the cabinet and poured it down the drain. And he said, "I'm finished with drinking." Apparently, his wife had said, "Enough is enough."
Good for her.
But Don didn't do anything else than give up drinking. He patted himself on the back for his superior willpower and did what the AA's first step was. He admitted that his life was unmanageable and he could not control himself and needed to surrender this drinking, and that he was out of control. But that was all he admitted. He didn't do the other 11 steps. He refused to go to AA or NA or to trust God with his life. Instead, within months, he began an affair with a young woman, a married young woman. And so then he started drinking again, lying again, cheating on his wife, ignoring his children, shirking his work, taking money from their account and spending it on hotels, and on top of that, committing adultery. So instead of one demon, now he had 7 demons in him, destroying his life. And this is what the Lord wants to prevent us from doing, is that if we get rid of one addiction, do not just let your house be empty, and do not let another demon come back and bring others with him. Because we read, "On return it finds the person swept and dusted, but vacant. Then it runs out and rounds up 7 other spirits, dirtier than itself, and they all move in, whooping it up. The person ends up far worse than he'd ever gotten cleaned up in the first place." And this can happen to any of us. Just think about Jesus' apostles. Judas really came to follow Jesus. And Jesus forgave him from his sins and welcomed him as part of the family. But Judas changed his behavior outside, but not his inside behavior. He kept his house inside empty. And so when the demon of greed came back to him, he let it in, and it brought other demons with him. The demon of lying and betrayal, the demon of conspiracy, the demon of depression and anger and despair, all came into Judas. And finally, the demon of self-destruction, so that after betraying Jesus, he killed himself, which is the devil's favorite way to get at the people he uses. Because the devil hates God and has come to destroy us. We are God's favorite creation, and this wounds God when our lives are thrown away and destroyed. And that's the devil's whole purpose, is to destroy all of us. And so when we are fighting the devil, we need to not just do it with our own willpower, but with God's help. And if we can, to go to AA or NA or any other anonymous group that looks to the higher power and depends upon God for our healing, and helps us work with our character defects. Because if we don't work with the defects that brought us into that addiction, they will bring us back. Amen. And this time worse than ever. We will turn out to be 7 times worse than we were. And the number of 7 was chosen because it's the number for completeness. There's 7 days in a week. And so when we don't trust God with our healing, we open up ourselves to complete destruction. Absolute, totally defeated destruction. But God is there for us. And God will heal us if we just trust Him. And this is what we need to do, is just to turn our lives over to God. There's no thing about being aloof from good and evil. You're either good or you're evil. You've either chosen to work for God or you've chosen to work for the enemy. There's no middle ground. There's no neutral place. Jesus said it, this is war. You're either for me or against me. And this is what we need to know, that there is no such thing as a small sin. Because that small sin lets the devil in. And the devil can use that to turn our lives into chaos. I remember clearly how I saw this in one of my dearest friends when I was serving in Connecticut. There was a young man whose parents were in part of my church who lived in New York, and his name was Fred. And Fred and I became good friends, and he invited me to have coffee with him in New York. So I went down to New York to have coffee with him, and was at a coffee house when Fred confided in me that he was HIV positive and that he was gay. And so I said, well, how can I help you? And he said, oh, I'm doing just fine. I just have one small problem. I love to pick up young men on the streets of New York and have sex with them, unprotected sex. But I think that's okay. I think God forgives me because He knows that I only have a limited time here on earth. And I said to Fred, what in the hell are you doing?
Preach.
And I meant that. What in the hell are you doing?
Say so.
You are going to hell for this if you continue this. This is the demon's work, and you are jeopardizing those young men's lives by your selfishness and by your lust. You are being controlled by the demon of lust, and this will condemn you to hell. And he looked at me with his eyes wide and he said, Pastor Liz, I never thought you were judgmental, but now I know who you are. You're just like my brothers, a fundamentalist Christian, and you're judging me when I just took you into my confidence. Then he got up from the table and walked out. And I sat there and just prayed for him and prayed, and I spent the whole next week praying for him. And then I got a phone call from Fred. And Fred said to me, I started praying about what you said, and at first I was really angry. And then God showed me what I was doing and how I was being so reckless and just letting the demon of lust control me. And he said, I have decided to rededicate my life to Jesus. I'm going to be celibate, he said. I'm finished with that lifestyle. And on top of that, I called my brothers who had said that they hated me because I was a homosexual. And I told them that I was still a homosexual, but I was celibate, and so my sexual orientation shouldn't come between us because it wasn't anything now for me. And then he said, I decided that I needed to work for the Lord. So I decided to work with women who are struggling with breast cancer.
Nice.
And so he became the unpaid assistant to the head of the Project on Women's Breast Cancer in New York City.
Wow.
And he worked for her for 2 years as her unpaid assistant. And then the week before Fred died, he called me, and he asked me if I had anyone else for his prayer list, which was tacked up beside his bed. And then he said to me, I know something I have to do right after I get off the phone. I need to get flowers for my ex-secretary's birthday. It's her birthday today, and I need to do that. Then he said, before I get off the phone, Reverend Liz, I want to ask you to do my funeral and to remember to praise my family for all the love and kindness they've given me. And don't make it a sad affair. Make it a joyous affair. Praise God for how good he's been to me, how he's changed my life, how he's taken over my life. And then he told me that during the last 2 years, at times he's been really tempted to go to the streets and let the demon of lust control his life. And he said at those times I got down on my knees and prayed and asked God to deliver me from this demon. Then he said I got up and did what God urged me to do, to go out and help people. And he said I got so busy helping people, I didn't have time for the devil. And so my life has just really changed. I can say that I am prepared for heaven now and not for hell. This is what God wants us to do. It's never over until it's over. The battle is never won until we're done. We can't rest in peace until we really rest in peace.
Tell me about it.
This is constantly a battle here on earth. No matter how old we are, it's never too late for the devil to seep in and try to attack us. Bill W., who is the founder of AA, on his deathbed, asked for an alcohol drink, asked for whiskey. And God had sent him his family who said, no, we won't give this to you. We won't let that demon control you now. We will not do this. And so God will be there with us through our friends, our family, through whomever we need to help us during all of our days until the very end. Even with our last breath, the devil is trying to attack us. But we need to always choose for God. There is no middle ground between good and evil. There's no middle ground between racism and evil. There's no middle ground between violence and peace. There's no middle ground between Christ and the devil. We need to choose whom we will serve and then faithfully serve God every day of our lives. Every day ask God, what do you want me to do today, God, for you? What do you have on your agenda, God? It's not my life that matters. It's what you want for me.
Thank you.
It's not what I selfishly want. That's the way of the evil one. To work through my selfishness so that I end up thinking of myself as better than other people and using people and mistreating others. But God, let me see the love that I have for you and let me work for you every day of my life. Let us stand now and pray that we can serve God and not the enemy.